Hello everybody and welcome to my review of Equinox and Equinox Prime. Now these are essentially the same Warframe, it's just that Equinox Prime has slightly better stats, so she's a little bit tankier and has more energy, but also if you go into the void and you touch a death orb there, it will restore some energy for you. Now, Equinox comes with two different passives. The first one is called Equilibrium, where whenever you pick up an energy orb, it will also restore 10% of the restored energy as health and vice versa. So when you pick up a health orb, it will also restore some energy. And the second one doesn't actually have a name, but it's kind of similar to what Chroma has, because you see Equinox can switch between her day form and her night form, and your base form when you first load into the mission is based on your primary emission color. If you have a light color, you will start in day mode, but if you have a darker color, you will start in night mode. And that is pretty much it, so let's check out Equinox's abilities. So her first ability is called Metamorphosis, and this one is extremely straightforward. It just switches her from her day form to her night form and vice versa. The way it works is you press a button, it will drain 25 energy, which is affected by power efficiency, and you will switch into the other form. There is a little bit more to it though, because whenever you switch forms, you will get a buff that lasts for 25 seconds at base, but can be increased or reduced with power duration. Now the buff you get depends on the form you switch into. If you switch into night form, you will get 250 armor and 150 shields, and if you switch into day mode, you will get 25% bonus weapon damage as well as 15% movement speed, and all of these bonuses are affected by power strength, so you can actually get quite a nice buff whenever you switch forms. Now the main reason to switch between these forms isn't to actually get the buff is just a nice little bonus on top. It's to get access to the form's abilities, because each form has its own set of abilities, which is why Equinox's abilities are called something and something, like rest and rage. You get rest in the night form and rage in the day form. Now there's also an augment for Metamorphosis called Duality, which makes it so that whenever you switch forms, the other half of you breaks free for 10 seconds and acts kind of like a spectre that uses the weapon you had equipped when you switched, and it does 300% damage. This is kind of neat, especially since you can increase the duration of the spectre by adding more power duration, though unfortunately the damage multiplier is locked at 300%. Also, keep it away from nullifiers, because if the spectre walks into a nullifying field, it will instantly die. And finally, you can only have one of these specters up at any given time, so if you try to switch forms while you already have a spectre, that spectre will die and will be replaced with a new one. Equinox's second ability is called Rest and Rage, and this can either enrage the enemies or put them to sleep, depending on the form you're in. In your day form, you get Rage, which will make the enemies take 50% more damage from all sources, but will also make them move and attack 20% faster. Plus, both the damage vulnerability as well as the speed increase are affected by power strength. Now in your night form, you get Rest, and this will just put them to sleep with a bit of a catch, because if they get down to 50% health, they will instantly wake up. The coolest thing about Rest and Rage is how it works, because by default you can cast it up to 50 meters away and it will hit all enemies within 5 meters of where you cast it for 22 seconds. And it's all scalable, so the duration is affected by power duration, and both the range at which you can cast it as well as the range at which it will hit enemies are affected by power range. Also, putting the enemies to sleep will open them up to finishers. The rage portion of this ability is definitely not as useful, because if you scale it up too high, the enemies actually become quite dangerous, but Rest is absolutely fantastic, and it was and still is one of the most popular abilities when it comes to focus farming. It allows you to crowd control entire rooms in no time whatsoever, and then just swoop in with a very strong weapon and get a ton of affinity thanks to the stealth kill affinity bonus. It's also extremely cheap. It starts off at 25 energy but can be lowered even further with more power efficiency. And finally, it also has a solid augment called Calm and Frenzy, and all this does is it makes it so that whenever you kill an enemy that's affected by Rest and Rage, it will spread the effect to enemies within 5 meters of that enemy for 100% of the remaining duration. And yes, the range of the augment is affected by power range, so you can make it spread even farther. Equinox's third ability is called Pacify and Provoke, where she emits an aura that changes based on her form. Now the aura by default has a radius of 16 meters, but this can be modified with power range. In day form, you get Provoke, which will grant 20% bonus power strength to all warframes within the aura, but it will drain 3 energy for every warframe within that aura. Now you can increase the bonus power strength you grant to warframes within your aura by adding power strength, though only up to a maximum of 50% bonus, and you can also reduce the amount of energy each warframe in your aura will drain with power efficiency. Power duration doesn't unfortunately work on this one, even though it is considered an energy drain. Now in night form, you get pacify, which reduces the damage enemies in your aura will do by up to 50%, with it being stronger towards the center and weaker towards the edge of the aura, but each enemy in your aura will also drain 0.5 energy per second. And here once again, the damage reduction is affected by power strength, so you can make the enemies do even less damage, and the drain of the ability is affected by power efficiency. Oh yeah, and power efficiency will also affect the initial cost of the ability, so activating the aura, which at base is only 10, so it's actually very cheap. And finally, there's also an augment for pacify and provoke called peaceful provocation, and what this does is it makes it so that pacify will convert damage done to your allies into an aura that slows enemies down by up to 40%, and provoke will convert damage done to enemies into up to 15% extra power strength. And this will just stack on top of what pacify and provoke already does. This is really cool, especially since the additional aura effects you get from the augment are also affected by power strength. And Equinox's fourth and final ability is called Mend and Maim, where depending on her form, she will either mend or, well, maim. Now this, just like Pacify and Provoke, is also an aura that has an 18-meter radius by default, but you can increase it with power range. It's also pretty cheap. It only costs 50 energy to activate, which can be lowered with power efficiency, and then drains 3.5 energy per second, which can be lowered with power efficiency and duration. The star of the show here is definitely the dayform version Maim, because it will do 150 slash damage to all enemies in the aura with a guaranteed status effect, so a guaranteed slash proc, but it will also accumulate 75% of all damage that's being done to the enemies inside your aura, which can then be released in a massive slash explosion. This is really strong, like one of the best AoE abilities in the game, kind of strong. And it doesn't need much, because while yes, you can increase the slash damage the aura does by adding more power strength, the damage conversion or damage accumulation is locked at 75%, so you don't really need that much power strength to make it do good damage. Especially since the damage you can affect with power strength, so the initial bit of slash damage, can only hit each enemy once. The only downside here is that the explosion damage from Maim does diminish with distance. Now, the night form version of this ability is called Mend, and what it does is it restores 25 shields for each enemy killed in the aura to Equinox and all the allies within her aura, and accumulates 75% of all the damage done to the enemies, which can then be released in a massive explosion that will heal and restore shields to Equinox and all her allies. It's still useful, but Maim is just too good. It does get a little bit better with power strength, because the amount of shields you restore to you and nearby allies per enemy killed in the aura is affected by power strength, though the damage accumulation is once again not. And finally, we also have an augment for Mend and Maim called Energy Transfer, and all this does is it allows you to keep the accumulated damage you've done to the enemies in your aura when you're switching from day form to night form and vice versa. Normally, if you don't use this, you're just gonna lose all the accumulated damage if you switch. Equinox is absolutely fantastic. She's not my kind of frame. I'm more into tanky, sort of chunky big boys, which she's not, but the amount of control and damage you can get out of her if you know what you're doing is just crazy. Plus, if you really want to, you can play her as a support frame as well. So I'm absolutely 100% going to recommend you give Equinox a shot. She is a bit of a pain to farm up though, at least the normal version, because you essentially have to farm 2 Warframes worth of parts from one single boss, so RNG can screw you over pretty hard. Because just in case you didn't know, Equinox has a day and night variants of each part, so instead of just farming the chassis, you have to farm the day chassis and then the night chassis separately. Which is why I would kind of recommend you go for Equinox Prime instead if you're not worried about the mastery from the standard version, because the Prime, if she's not vaulted, is much easier to farm because she doesn't have this day-night nonsense going on. But anyway, that's pretty much it for the video, so I thank you very much for watching as always, guys. I would like to extend a special thank you to all the channel members. Thank you very much, guys. You're awesome. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.